People that always say that they have a conflict. Pardon me, they have a conflict, and they would love to see the recording afterwards. So we always record them for that reason. Anyway, so here's our agenda for the day. We're want to have our quick check-in here that we already did. I didn't get to see because when I present, I can't see. So where were people from, by the way?
We have folks from Charleston, South Carolina, Golden, Colorado, Chicago, Illinois, and London, I think, is the farthest one.
All right. Another international. Good. So we'll shoot to spend about 30 minutes on the presentation. Last time, because we're Agile Consultancy, we always ask for feedback, and we got feedback that the previous workshop, the folks would like to have more Q&A time. So we're ensuring we've moved some things around and allocating lots of time for Q&A at the end now. And then we'll wrap up and adjourn all before the top of the hour. All right, so why do we need a safety check? The answer is, has anybody raise your hand if you've heard of something called Modern Agile? I'm pointing up here at the top. Okay, great. So Modern Agile has some things that they emphasize for areas in particular, and without going into it in great detail, one of those is making safety a prerequisite. So being Agile, therefore, requires safety as a prerequisite. And so that's what we'll be emphasizing today is what Modern Agile emphasizes as part of their framework. Interestingly enough, also, there's business reasons that we'll get into in great detail later. But the number one impediment, Google did some research, and they found the number one impediment to teams becoming hyper-performing is this thing called psychological safety. So we'll talk about what that means in the definition, how we'll use it in today's workshop as well. I like to say, if you don't feel safe, you won't experiment. If you don't experiment, you don't innovate. And if you don't innovate over time, then you go out of business. So there's compelling business reasons to do so. Did I hear someone interject something? I thought I heard something. No. Alrighty. So the reasons for doing this are many, ranging from some people think that it's almost cosmetic in some ways, but I like to emphasize this particular story to show that it actually can have life and death consequences. This is not a theoretical thing. If you go to YouTube and Google airplane disasters, you'll find an unfortunate number of examples where this specific situation often will occur. So correcting one's boss, what's that dynamic is called the power distance. So this is literally a quote from the cockpit. The co-pilot on a very cold day around Washington, D.C. Said, hey, we need to check the ice on the wings again. It's been a while. It had been about an hour and it was below zero. And the captain's pretty task-oriented and was saying, nope, we're next in line. We got to get out of here. And it was not that much longer that they actually crashed into a bridge and killed everybody in the plane, of course, and everybody that was in the area for the bridge as well. So correcting one's boss is the biggest psychological safety dynamic to get over, but it ranges from the fatal kind of situation like what we're talking about here to other areas that we'll be getting into shortly. So do you have psychological safety where you work? Curious, we'll have a couple spots for some discussion. I like to read out this little Muppets GIF. It's not about where you work, it's about who you work with. So psychological safety is a 360 kind of situation. That power distance at the top is part of that, but it's on the colleague level as well. So enjoying, loving who you work with is so important. As opposed to in the office, the psychologically unsafe Michael Scott was often causing lots of problems. And this GIF reads, to err is human, to blame it on someone else. Now that's management material right there. All right, so this is a part that Sarah, I'm gonna turn it over to you to talk about psychological safety as our friends here on the call think what they think it is. So over to you.
Yeah, so first we're going to talk about what everybody here sees psychological safety as. So you can either respond in the chat or you can raise your hand and speak if you would prefer. But I'd love to see what everybody thinks psychological safety means.
I see Jim raising his
Jim,
hand.
yeah.
I can't
You want to
see
go
text,
first?
but I can see pictures.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I like one thing that stands out to me about psychological safety is it's not just the ability to speak up and to question things or question your manager or question and coach up. I think psychological safety also includes the feeling heard component of it, right? Because I've been a lot of places where you're like, yeah, say what you want and you can challenge me, but when you challenge, you feel like it either falls on deaf ears or it's just kind of completely ignored and kind of brushed aside. So I think the feeling heard is an important component of it as well.
Mhm. Absolutely. And Amy, I see that you have your hand up. Would you like to share your thoughts?
Sure. Yeah, I feel like it's has a lot to do with being able to speak freely, have healthy conflict, not being afraid to have those conflict
Mm.
conversations, and not feeling like you can't challenge others or even leader. It's not even just leaders. I feel like it goes beyond leaders. It goes in within your team as well. So I feel like it expands, but starts with leadership.
Absolutely. And it looks like Michaelan Rush says being able to state your opinions or challenge authority without fear of punishment. So again, along that line of having healthy conflict. I think those are some really fantastic responses. Brian, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to you.
Thanks so much, Sarah.
Mhm.
Sounds like someone is familiar with the what I use as the formal definition of psychological safety, because it was almost a verbatim part of it there. So the working definition that we use for psychological safety is from Dr. Amy Edmondson, professor of leadership and management at the Harvard Business School. By the way, my computer is running a little slow, so I just want to make sure that is everybody seeing this picture of Dr. Amy Edmondson? Okay, great.
Mhm.
Terrific. All right, so her definition is psych safety, and part of what was said is exactly in here. I believe that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, like in the airline example, their concerns, or ultimately a mistake there. So that's our working.
I think he froze up.
Looks like Brian froze there. Let me just contact him real quick. I'm sure he'll be back very shortly.
I like that he said he's having technical issues and then oops. There
I
we
was just
go.
about to say, it's like he predicted the future there.
Yeah.
So we'll give it just a few minutes here. I'm sure he's rebooting now as we speak. That is not normally an issue, so I do apologize about that. Let's go ahead and just discuss a little bit more. What are some anti-patterns that you guys have seen in different organizations to psychological safety?
Micromanaging.
Micromanaging, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Well, a bad one. Like a really bad one.
Yeah.
I've told previous employers that there's not really a faster way to get me shut down than to micromanage me. Like, if
Yeah.
you wanted to do the work yourself, why did you hire me? Like,
Right.
I would also say, coming from, I know you and I worked at a call center in the past, Sarah, and scripts can be unhelpful, can't they? I get why they exist at
Very
times. But
unhelpful.
yeah, that was just not fun. As I think of a different creative angle on, how I might be able to talk to a customer or a client or something, and surprise, I'm being reprimanded for innovating. So that
Yeah.
was not very psychologically safe. I did not enjoy that.
Absolutely. So Brian, we were
Yeah.
just discussing some anti-patterns to psychological
Mhm.
safety that we have seen, and
Mhm.
micromanagement is one that came up, as well as scripts.
Oh, scripts as in Howard?
Scripts as in like having to follow a script.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I think I had heard something about scripts Howard, but anyway. All right. Are you seeing my screen?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that. My here in Durham, wonderful Durham, North Carolina, which is wonderful in many ways, but our weather has been causing problems with the internet for some reason. It's so weird. Anyway, so let's try one more time. All right. So what I'm saying is, myself and another coach years ago co-created a leadership model that we called Form. And originally, it was just talking about eliminating the fear. But I later thought of another F that is so important, kind of like the other side of the coin of fear being fun. So the FORM acronym has two F's in it, fun and fear. The O stands for obstacle removal. R is for rewarding team behavior. And rewards, notice its emphasis is on non-cash ways to reward your team. And the M is traditional mentoring and coaching. In today's session, we'll be talking about improving psychological safety, which is usually connected to fear, but it's got components of fun also. We'll talk about fun for a little bit here, and then we'll turn back to talking about how to minimize fear. We never fully eliminate it. So, Sarah, this is your part to facilitate again. So over to you again.
Yeah. So as far as having a fun workplace, I'd love to hear what you guys' thoughts are on this. What do you think are good business reasons to foster a fun workplace? And again, you can use the chat or you can raise your hand and we can have you talk. So Jim says it improves engagement. I would definitely agree with that. Any other thoughts?
Overall happiness.
Overall happiness. Yeah. I would definitely argue that happier people are going to work better and probably not quit as often.
Yeah.
I think about something that Marty Kagan talks about a little bit is that whole missionary versus mercenaries thing, right? And treat people like missionaries, you're actually utilizing more of their brain power, for lack of a better term, but they're going to be able to put their best foot forward and their best self forward. And you get more out of them, more creativity, more thinking, more problem solving, more innovation.
Yeah, that's really good. Mercenary versus missionary.
Yeah, Marty Kagan's got a book called Inspired. I don't know if I shared that with my own team, but I just started re-listening to it yesterday.
Yeah.
Great stuff.
Awesome. Any final thoughts before we move on? No? All right. Brian, I'll hand it back over to you so that you can show them the numbers.
All righty. Thank you, Sarah. Okay, so the first one up is all these stats are out of Jeff Sutherland's Doing Twice the Work in Half the Time. So I just shamelessly ripped off the stats from, I think it's chapter 7 in his book. So the first one up is talking about productivity, 43% greater productivity, 33% higher profitability, 37% increase in sales. And the next one is what really is staggering, 300% more innovation. So if you don't have psychological safety, you're missing out on when I first started this wonderful engagement with the Agile community back about 12 years ago. My certified Scrum trainer at the time told me a phrase, and that was the collective genius of the team. If you don't have psychological safety, you cannot tap fully into the psychological safety of the team. We'll talk shortly here about this thing that we call the safety check on a scale of 1 to 5. And the goal is to have people answer a 4, so 80% along on that scale. If you're not at a 4, you're definitely not in that 300% threshold for improved innovation. Next up is 50% lower staff turnover. The boss is the one that creates the environment for your teams to. The original title for this presentation is improving psychological safety for your agile teams to thrive. So if you're working in a hostile workplace, then you're probably not you're going to be looking for ways to get out, right? So 51% lower staff turnover isn't a surprise from that perspective. 66% lower sick leave, 125% less burnout. So all of these amazing stats together are reasons that we should have fun in the workplace. Was there a comment there?
No, we just had someone join.
Oh, okay, great. Anyway, so decreasing fear. So moving from fun back to the other side of the coin, decreasing fear. Fear paralyzes leaders and team members, everybody. It's not just individual contributors. The anti-pattern, fear. One of our previous clients did an annual employee survey, and they asked the same question in this context over and over. But they ask about, are you comfortable challenging authority? And this particular year where I captured the stat, almost 2/3 said that they were afraid to challenge authority. So remember back to that innovation, the collective genius of the team. So 2/3 of their employees were not just like, I wonder if I should share my thoughts. They were afraid, right? So it was just staggering and so tragic that the stat would be so large and dark. And so speaking of large and dark, I threw this GIF up there to kind of illustrate the point. And we adopted years ago this metaphor of sharks in the water. So leaders who are angry, hostile, and not encouraging, fierce feedback is the phrase that we use. They are what we call sharks in the water. And I'll talk more about a shark in a moment. But eliminating fear, so that's our challenge. So how to do that? Raise your hand if you've heard people talking about psychological safety recently, in the last month, right? I was just talking to a potential client yesterday, and they were saying, "Oh yeah, we're talking about the everyday." And I said, and are you talking about what to do about it? And silence. No. Yes, psychological safety is so important, but what do we do about it? So that's what the purpose of this workshop is for. So we use, not that it's a silver bullet, but it is an attempt to do something about it. One of our previous clients, I was personally leading this engagement. Got to do this with in 3 different use cases. So there's 3 different ways that we found so far to use this. And we are in today's session going to be using the original use case, which is raise your hand if you've ever been in a retrospective and people are not sharing really important information that they should to help the team to get better, right? I mean, it happens all the time. So 12 years ago, I started this Agile coaching gig and Agile coaching career. And I found out immediately in the retrospective, people are just saying fluffy, cosmetic kind of stuff, not things that are going to really make a difference. So I got tired of that pretty quick, and I've been doing this safety check for probably 10 years now. Anyway, so I mentioned that there's 3 different use cases. So the original one is what we call the team level retrospective use case. I've numbered it number 3. The first one is for senior leaders. The second use case is for HR direct reports. So a leader and the people that report to her or him. So there's 2 questions, and the scale that we have used from the beginning is the same construct. The questions are exactly the same, except for the red part and the yellow part of the question. So the STEM is always, how safe do you feel to provide A? So in the team level retrospective, that changes to be contrarian voice in your team's retro. And we have pretty much the same scale for all three use cases. The first one is the highest level of psychological safety. I mentioned on a scale of 1 to 5 that we want to have an average of 4 or higher. So 5 is beyond that. And it's where I always wonder when people say 5 that they have no concern about sharing any thought that goes through their brain. And I'm like, really? That seems odd. But anyway, so that's what 5 is defined as. Number 4, I'll talk about almost anything, which seems more realistic, right? Almost anything. I'm going to use some wisdom, and a few things might be hard for me to say. And then we start to fall below that target average line where we want to be. And often see, there's only been one time when I did the safety check, and it was interestingly with a group of coaches. And with that group of coaches, the average was like 4.1. But in every other time, since I've been doing this for about 10 years, it's always below 4. So the beginning of the next level down is defined as, I'll talk about some things, but others will be hard to say. Not might be hard, but will be hard to say. 2 is the beginning of where a leadership team should be very concerned about having voluntary attrition higher than where you'd want it to be for sure. At 2, people are definitely revising the resume, looking for ways to get out of Dodge. So I'm not going to say much. I'll let others bring up issues because it's not safe here. And 1 is the height of denial. I'm going to act like everything is terrific here, but I'm absolutely, I've got my resume up to date, and I'm applying to jobs on LinkedIn every single day. But I'm like, everything is terrific. I love it here, and you're the best manager ever. Anyway, so notice in the red part here, this is the part that pivots based on use case. So managers is defined as the product owner and the product lead. Depending on the client, they use different terms for the person doing the product management role, and the Scrum Master. And then the second question is, what could be done to get you to go 1 number higher? From an agile perspective, that's what we're always looking for. And note it's not to go from a 2 to a 5. It is incremental. It is we're being realistic. If you're at a 2, it's going to probably take a lot to get you to go from a 2 to a 3 and from a 3 to a 4. And I'm unconcerned about someone that's a 4 going to 5 because, again, I hold out number 5 as I don't know that that's really real for people to think I can say anything without fear of retribution in any way, shape, or form at any point for years, right? So that's my take on those things. So we're going to, in this workshop, act like we're in a team that does a retrospective, use case number 3. And we're going to go through and actually do one of these. So we use Microsoft Forms. And there's the 2 questions that I mentioned before, plus the first one actually is the workshop code, so that we can differentiate from clients and others who have done this workshop in the past. We have to use a workshop code, some number to differentiate. So that workshop code is, Sarah, if you'll pop that into it, is number 7.
Yeah, so we had a few people with the same question about how do you make sure that people are answering this honestly, which is a great question. We do use this anonymous form, which helps a lot. I did have an additional question from somebody here saying, what do you do when you have a small team? And it would be easy to figure out who said what, even in an anonymous form.
Yeah, great question. So let me take them one question at a time. It was actually with previous client that I was doing an assignment with that both of those situations came up. But how do you assure that people are being honest? So that came up, and it was in the context of a team that only had 4 people. And I'd heard stories about, and this was for a different use case. It was for the direct report, which made it worse. So these people reported to a person who had a different command and control kind of feel to her at times. And during the workshop, I got the results, and I knew the results would be less than 4 because that's always the case, but I knew it would be exacerbated because of the dynamic that I had come to understand. And the score was higher than I thought it would be. It was like a 3.9. And I just said just out loud, so I thought it'd be lower. And one of the people in the group said, okay, I'll confess. I was the one with the lowest score, and I would have said a lower number, but I didn't feel safe to say what I really thought.
Mm.
And it's like, oh, that is so sad, but it's an acknowledgement of the reason for the question, right? Because
Yeah.
people know, especially in a smaller team, that they'll figure out who it is. One of the first times I did it a long time ago was for Cisco, and it was a large enough team. It was too big, in fact. It had like 10 plus people in it. And on the distribution from 1 to 5, the lowest score was a 2, which is where people are in danger of leaving, right? And when I showed the distribution to the manager, he said, "Oh, I know who that is." I'm like, "No, you can't do that. And you can't like try to pinpoint and address a specific situation. You have to change your general leadership style."
Mm.
So you'll see that as we go through the workshop here. You have to coach the leaders not to do that. It's always a temptation. And that leader that I was just talking about, she absolutely, even though the score was artificially higher, she said, "Oh, I know who that is." And she, even though she knew who that was, she actually parsed the individual 4 people in the team and said, "So
He was on a roll too.
Oh. Looks like we lost him again, so I apologize about that. I do have the workshop inside of the chat, so if you guys want to follow that link while we're waiting for Brian to come back, you can actually go ahead and fill that out, and we'll use workshop code number 7 for that.
Is this for our existing team structure?
Yep, for your existing team structure. Thank you for the clarifying question. Definitely some really great questions from everyone on the realistic implementation of this. As you can tell from Brian's stories, it's been an issue in the past. Welcome back, Brian. I have got them working on the form.
terrific." I have switched to be on a hotspot on my iPhone now, and I'm surprised if this is working very well. Is it working well though?
You're a little grainy, but you're still with us.
Okay. As long as if the audio is good, then I'll stay grainy, but I want to make sure the audio is good. Audio good? Okay, terrific. To Durham, North Carolina, it's great here, especially the internet.
I'm a little further south in Fuquay, Varina, and we have Ting, so I have a gigabyte of internet. So maybe you just need to go a little further south.
Okay, or switch to Google Gigabit, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for taking over and ensuring the continuity there. I was asking if I had answered that question, though. Did I answer the question?
I believe that the answer I heard was that is an issue, and it's important to coach the leadership through that.
Great. Okay. If there's any follow-up questions, we'll address that in the Q&A. Okay, cool. So we're doing the 1 to 5. Everybody's got the workshop code, and I'm gonna monitor the responses as they come in. They're anonymous. And this is an artificial situation, but
I told them to do it for their current organization.
Great. Even better. we didn't actually put a time box on this. But I'll look to see how people are progressing and we'll figure out how to proceed from there. I got 5 responses so far, and how many people should we be looking for here, Sarah?
We have a total of 7 participants besides yourself and myself.
Great.
But I know that Sharon and Anathas are both having internet issues, so they may not be able to complete the form.
Ah, you're in Durham too. Got it.
No,
It's a joke. Durham's the only place with internet problems.
The only place for sure.
Right, right. Just so you see, as the person who the purpose of the workshop is to not just show it to you, but to teach you how to do it well enough so that you can actually do it for your clients, your employer. So I'm going to show you behind the scenes what you can see, what I was just referencing there. Do you see the Microsoft Forms screen come up here?
Mhm.
Okay. So we now see we have 7 responses, and I'll show this in the slide as well. It took an average of about 3 minutes. So let's amend that slide to put a time box of like 4 or 5 minutes on there. And we got the workshop code. Of course, that's going to be the same for everybody, or hopefully is the same for everybody. Oh, I should point out the previous client actually, it used to be just 1 team at a time or 1 leadership team at a time, just 1 entity at a time. But then I had the challenge. A release train engineer said, I have 7 teams and I want to do it all at the same time. And I was like, oh, okay, I don't know how to use my current assessment technology to do that. And then I found out the free Microsoft Forms does this. And so you just have a different workshop code for every team, and it differentiates based on the workshop codes. So that's how you can do multiple teams concurrently. And you can see based on the number of people doing it, you know whether or not you're done here. We'll show the stats here, but the largest piece of the pie here is 2. It looks like I'm not going to say much. Well, here's the count. So we have a pretty even distribution. So we got 2 4s, 2 3s, and 2 2s. I would emphasize with leaders in particular, the lowest score. I'd say the low score is. So there's 2 people that are in definite danger of you losing them. So you need to change your leadership style. So there's a nice little pie chart that's there too. And the 1 actionable item, the latest responses are there. And just to read those out briefly, I brought up a concern to management about a client. And they told me, just deal with it. I am assuming the rest of that is what that says. More consistent retrospectives. I'm not sure if that means like cadence. Maybe you don't do retrospectives every 2 weeks or whatever your cadence is there. And make a new retrospective framework and mention the benefits of critical feedback, I guess. So that's what it looks like on the back end. Microsoft Forms has an export to comma separated values. We've got a spreadsheet that we're happy to share with you. You plugged the CSV into the model, and it pumps out the statistics that you're about to see in the PowerPoint. So that's what it looks like on the back end. Let me show you how I format it for our clients now. And is my audio still good, Sarah?
Yeah, it was getting a little choppy for a minute there, but otherwise it seems okay.
Let me go off video till the I want to make sure the audio is good.
Okay.
All right, testing 1 2 3. Is it good? Good.
Sounds good so far.
Yep.
Okay. All right, so let me go back in full screen mode. All right, so that's where we were. All right, there's 3 pieces of the overall process. So the first part is what we do together with the, depending on the use case, typically a team at a time, maybe 7 teams at a time, whatever. So that's the first part. In the second meeting is with leadership only. And it's with the facilitator, typically an agile coach, that reviews the results privately with leadership. And why is that? That's because the comments might say something. My leader is toxic. I can't wait to get out of here, right? So that is not something that you want to, for the first time, to share publicly and have the leader look like a fool, right? Maybe they deserve to look like a fool, but if you're trying to get what I've found, raise your hand if you've found that you can't get rid of the leader typically. You have to coach the leader, right? You have to help the leader to get better. The employee is the one that gets terminated, right? Not the leader usually. Sometimes, very rare. Definitely worked with a couple of agile transformations where ironically, the person at the top was the most toxic person in the organization. But that's another story. All right, so that's the second meeting. You do that privately with the leadership. Then the third meeting is with everybody again. So everybody gets back together, and then we do a mural, which we're about to do here, using privacy mode, so we continue the anonymity. All right, so these are the results, just nicely formatted from what I showed you live there from Microsoft Forms. And you can see the counts here. And over here is the analysis. That it's not rocket science, but unless you want to reinvent the wheel, happy again to just give you the spreadsheet where you can plug the comma separated values into the model, and it's going to give you this information. So in this example, 27 of 36 people, 75% participation rate, were actually providing their feedback, which is really great. A lot of all employee kind of surveys are 30%, 40% kind of participation. So it's a testimony that, again, this is not a silver bullet, but this approach, this tool, so to speak, employees, individual contributors, teams love to use it in comparison to typical all-employee kind of instruments. The average score here was 3.96. The most frequent response was a 4. The median is a 4. And that low score, again, is the thing that when you're talking to leaders or whatever the use case is, you want to emphasize what the low score is, because that's that part where they're passive aggressive. It's all good here and it's not. And then I like to show last stat together because 5, again, I'm not such a big believer that people are actually at 5. So I combine 4 and 5 together. And so 70% in this example, this is with the 7 teams that I mentioned before, 70% were at a 4 or a 5, which sounds great, but that means a third are below a 4. So that's not so good. You want to get those folks up. And
Jim made a good point here in the chat, Brian. He said that he's done something similar in a number of occasions and noticed a trend based on tenure, that newer folks tend to score higher and those who have been around longer have a tendency to score lower.
Oh, right. Yeah, I get the dynamic there. That makes sense. I can definitely see how that happened.
Yeah.
And felt that happen too. You know, the bruises, the scars accumulate over time, which was the person who, did I mention, she actually broke down crying. She said, it was me, but she broke down crying and sobbing.
Oh my gosh.
We usually, that second part of the meeting, remember there's 3 parts, and the second part where we this was a super strict situation. In the first part where we collected the information, the team actually said the manager cannot be here when we're giving our anonymous feedback, which I'd never gotten before. I was like, oh, this is bad. And so the manager wasn't even there. And so the team was able to say just openly, when I said, I'm surprised that the average is so high, why isn't it lower? And then the person said, okay, it was me. I would give it a 2 or a 1 kind of thing, but she would definitely know that it's me then. And she just started sobbing. Like loud. I was like, okay. So that process, this usually takes just part 1 alone to explain all the content that we've covered so far and to do the workshop. Part 1 alone takes about 45 to 60 minutes. I like to allocate 60 minutes. But that session with that person, with that small group of 4 and the person breaking down crying went on for 3 hours because it became kind of like, a feedback session and counseling and group hug kind of. It's going to be okay.
Yeah.
So it was really dramatic stuff. Anyway, so this is just the presentation. We give stats to the leaders there, and we share the free-form feedback with the leaders there. What you'll see when we get to the mural is that I take the free-form feedback and I put them on a scrum board of keep, stop, starts. And all the free-form feedback is about one idea to go one number higher. So those are all starts by definition. Despite the fact that I emphasize, so the things that you give feedback on need to be actionable. So you can't say something like, my manager needs to improve. It can't be something generic. It's got to be a specific thing to do. So if a person gives non-actionable feedback, then I scrub that because it's just a waste of time to even talk about it. All right, so now we're talking about the mural. So Sarah, I don't know if you already shared the mural link, but if you will go ahead and pop that in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So I've popped the mural into the chat. I did want to let you know, Brian, McKaylin had said that she had a similar thought about demographic questions to identify if there are systemic issues that could be correlated with race or gender. That's pretty interesting.
Capture like another question, like are
Yeah.
you male, female kind of thing, and what race are you?
I believe so, yeah.
Interesting.
She's saying people's experience of a workplace can differ a lot
Yeah.
based on their gender and their race. So that's a great point.
No. Okay. I'm gonna make note of that.
Yeah.
As to talk about. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. Where people came from and their current circumstances definitely impacts how they show up.
I've definitely
Terrific.
been in workplaces before where the men are having a great time and the women don't feel psychologically safe and aren't having a good time. So I know just from that limited scope, it can be very different.
Right. Being blessed with 4 boys and 3 girls, of course, I get that. Definitely get that in spades. Anyway, so I see a couple of people in. Is anybody having problems getting into the mural? You should be getting in as a visitor. I see a visiting shark, visiting bird, visiting ladybug, so many fun things. And so now that we have a few people in, let me give an example of an example here from a previous client. So you double click if you're not used to these post-its in mural, double click and it allows you to type. So keep on having Friday ice cream socials. Yay, that's great. That's fun, camaraderie. A start actually, I'll put in again, this is from the freeform feedback. Let me bring that back up here. Drag this one back down. All right, so the freeform feedback. I'm going to read mode. Start. Have retrospectives every sprint. So that is based on one of the pieces of feedback that I read out loud. And if it's one that's from part 1, the Microsoft Forms, I don't just put it there. I actually take it down to the what I call the improvement backlog, and I put it into the backlog space. So this illustrates a really important part that leadership begins to do in that second part of this process when I show the information to the leaders alone. So it's at that point that the leaders see things that they can begin to do something about, and they begin to prioritize this improvement backlog. So from part 1, Microsoft Forms, they begin their improvement backlog, they begin to prioritize it. And then here in the mural part, they get additional ideas. And so it's always up to them. This is really important dynamic. Every piece of feedback, this is like Will saying that I say to everything from leaders to teams, all feedback is desired. All feedback is not actioned. Does that make sense? So we always want feedback, but we're not going to always do something about it. We don't have unlimited resources. We can't act on every idea that comes out. So we have to prioritize it just like any backlog. So that's how the keep stop starts work. That's how you interact with Mural if you haven't done before. Double click on any of the post-its and that allows you to edit. So I think we said we're going to spend about 10 minutes here. I think we might have spent about 5 minutes so far. So everybody, as Sarah said, in your own context, think about things that keep doing, stop doing. And when I'm doing this for real, I get those pieces of feedback and I put them in the starts and I drag them down. So that's just all automatically done. If you want to, whatever you put into the anonymous feedback, the question about what's one thing I can do, you could go ahead and double click on any of these starts and put those in for now too. And I'll let them work for a couple of minutes. But Sarah, anything you want to add here?
Yeah, so you're just gonna join the mural and put in some ideas for your existing workspace for things that you want to keep, things that you don't like that are happening, that you would like to stop, and then things that you would like to try and start. Looks like we have some really great ideas already.
Yeah, it's great to see. The keep can be the fun things. Oh, I didn't get to mention, I usually, when I see that sharks in the water, that story just kicks in. It's the first time I've ever not just automatically shared the story. So back on the sharks in the water, while you guys are working, share this. So keep on having Friday ice cream socials, right? So leadership team at previous client of ours came to me and said, yeah, so this sharks in the water thing, we got one of those. I'm like, oh, tell me more. And they said, yeah, so we went to him and we said, hey, on our dime, not the company's dime, we as your leadership team want to have an ice cream social during the employees' lunch break. And they knew that there might be a problem. So that's why they brought the shark in the water. His name's Steve. They went to Steve and they said, so we'll pay for it on the employee's time. Won't cost a dime, not cost any time. No dime, no time. And is that okay? And Steve said, of course not. This is a place of work. We got to be focused on getting the work done. And I'm like, really? You're not making this up? Like, oh no, that happened, Brian. I was like, wow, that is bad. So remember the statistics about like 300% innovation if you have a fun workplace. So I went through that slide with Steve and some members of his leadership team and a person that was running the Agile transformation, and went over that slide. And at the end of the slide, where I've given all these amazing stats on why it's so important to have fun in the workplace, Steve stopped me and he said, Brian, I've worked here for 30 years and I've never had a day of fun here. And I don't care if anybody else does either.
What a joy.
What? I'm like, should I go? And the guy that's leading the transformation, he's like, no, just keep on going, Brian. Like, okay. So yeah.
He said, we're used to it.
Yeah.
Oh my
It's
gosh.
just Steve being Steve. But he ran the place. And in great contrast, I went over to India and worked with his peer. And his peer was super coachable. And the peer over there had a really toxic scrum master. And I told him, the scrum master is just causing all kinds of problems. And he said, but I hired her from McKinsey, like that made her bulletproof. And I'm like, I don't care where she came from. She's super toxic and she's got to go. And he said, I just can't. I would look like a fool. And I said, okay, well, I'll get back with you. And I've got this little test for Scrum Masters. And on a scale of 1 to 10, I asked them to self-rate. And on all 6 of the attributes, she came back and she said she was a 10. She was perfect in every way on all attributes. And I went back to the leader and I said, so this is another example of why she's got to go. And he's like, wow, I would only give myself like a 7 at most for a lot of these. And and he's like, I see now, Brian. Okay. And then within 48 hours, she was a project manager. Anyway, so yeah, psychological safety runs from the Steves of the world, sharks in the water, but sharks in the water can be scrum masters too. So watch out. All right, we need to bring this ship in for a landing. So let me share my screen with the presentation again. All right, so keep calm, keep calm. All right, so we've got a feedback form, and then we have time for Q&A, which we still didn't have enough time for, thanks to technical difficulties.
I
If
love
you'll,
everybody's ideas in Mural. Just I want to take a second and acknowledge that I saw some really great stuff
Oh,
in
yeah.
there.
Yeah, you want to read something? in
Yeah, I
particular?
want to highlight at least a couple here. So in the keep section,
Okay.
I
Okay,
saw using our words to celebrate each other and taking time during the retro to appreciate the team seems to kind of be a theme. I saw that from several different sticky notes. So that positive feedback can be really intrinsically motivating in my experience. And so it's awesome to see that that's happening. I also see on here responding genuinely to feedback. So I know that at least somebody here has given feedback and it was received well. So I know that that can be a really wonderful situation. Under stop, we have joining interactive meetings from the car. That's a great stop. That's such a stressful situation when you have people like trying to not get into accidents and trying to be interactive. Like you don't want them to crash and you also feel like you can't get their attention. So that's a good point for sure. And then we also have responding to feedback with I don't care as a stop. That's definitely a big red flag and a good sign that it's got a lot of problems if they don't care about the feedback.
Right.
Start,
Right.
we have sharing failures and what was learned and not just things that are going well. I actually recently heard about a company where they created a fastest to fail award, and they would every quarter come up with a failure of the team and say this was our best failure because we learned the most from it, and they would give an award every quarter for whichever failure learned or helped the most. And I thought that was a really creative way to kind of start with that experiment that somebody put up here. So I love that start. So yeah, I just wanted to cover a few of those things here. I do also have a feedback form for you all. This is going to be just about the workshop today. So we would love your feedback on things that you would like to see differently in the future, or any questions, comments, concerns that you may have about the workshop today. So I'm going to go ahead and put that into the chat here. Jim says the adoration of McKinsey with leaders is exhausting. I would agree.
Yeah. Wow. So much to say there. Anyway, McKinsey. Okay. All right. So Q&A. What questions do you have? We've been covering some things, but what questions do you have about the workshop? And most importantly, this is a Max Agility kind of motto. Our goal is to teach our clients, our students, the people we mentor, how to be successful when we're gone. So we just showed this to you. We want you to be able to do this without us. In fact, we offer, because we care so much about after transformations going well, and since it's the #1 impediment to teams becoming hyper-performing, we give a free 1-hour consultation to help people to do this workshop. Happy to tell you that there's been a number of people that have taken the material and they've begun using it, and it's all free. We just we care about the community. I learned 12 years ago when I started doing this. Used to be a dyed-in-the-wool PMI, PMP guy, and they charge for everything. They charge for the meetups. They charge for the training. They charge for I mean, if I look at you, how much is that going to cost? I was successful as an agile coach because I lean so heavily on people. We stand on the shoulders of giants, is the phrase, right? So I became successful as an agile coach thanks to people just wanting to altruistically help me out.
Well,
So
Jim,
that's
it
what
looks like you have a question, so I'd love to dive into that.
Yeah, so really good stuff, Brian. Thank you so much. I love the, like the workshop idea of how to suss out if there are issues or concerns around psychological safety. There's another side to it too, which is some people just inherently aren't comfortable speaking up, right? So it's hard to even know whether or not psychological safety in some cases exists or not. So like one thing I do when coaching is try to model that behavior. So I'll be that outspoken person on calls to try to show them, hey, it's okay to kind of speak your mind type. But do you have any other suggestions for that? Like how to kind of pull people in to sharing and really being open. And I know that's a really tough topic, probably not a quick one to answer, but it's curious if it kind of popped to mind right off the top for you and that kind of, how do you help coach around that?
Yeah, Sarah and I actually just refined the presentation to say type and discuss. So people, to your point, let me say it perhaps imprecisely. An introvert will type something or write something but never say something. So providing some forum for them to just say something but silently, so to speak, is definitely an approach. I found also as I think a lot of coaches fall into the trap of doing whole team coaching only. And so what I found is when I started engagement, if I'm not tasked with too many teams concurrently, as an example, then having individual one-on-one meetings with people, because they'll tell you stuff in a one-on-one that they'll never say in public, even if they're an introverted person, right? So and Lisa Atkins in her wonderful Coaching Agile Teams book is where I felt like, oh, I'm that guy that does whole team coaching only. I need to do individual coaching. I need to have the individual meetings. So I learned that surprisingly late in my career, but it's amazingly valuable. So those are some of my initial thoughts. I wonder, collective genius of the team, are there any other ideas from anybody else? And I want to acknowledge that we're 1 minute away, so feel free to drop, but anybody else, let me tap into the collective genius of the team. Any other ideas from the team here or folks in the meeting?
I like the modeling idea a lot. Just seeing somebody doing it and not dying immediately after. That's always very encouraging for me. Right, on days I'm feeling extra introverted. So definitely modeling it, typing, anonymity when you can tap into it. Just any of those tools, any and everything, just minimizes that friction I have with fierce feedback.
I'm currently the Scrum Master for a very small team, and I'm also a team member for that team. And so I took that opportunity to demonstrate a failure. So there was one sprint where things got pretty crazy and I didn't finish one of my stories. And so I did the whole failure bow. I was like, okay, guys, I'm so sorry. I did not get to follow up with Julie. I got to take the failure bow. I'm sorry for letting you down. And they were like, it's fine. It's just a little thing. Like, why are you? And then after that, I started noticing them being okay with saying, I didn't get this completed, or I didn't do this as well as I wanted to. Like, I wonder how I can get better at this, because I demonstrated that it was safe to fail just by acknowledging my own issues. I gotta admit, I was super sweaty when I did that. I was like, they're gonna think I'm a failure. And I'm like, wait, if I want this to be psychologically safe, and if it truly is, then I should be able to lead by example. So I think that, like John and like Brian were saying, that modeling can be really powerful.
I actually recorded myself with a failure and sent it to the team because I felt like I do it often enough. I just need to record it.
Yeah. I love it. I also like the concept of the failure bow, of being like, ta-da, I did it.
Yeah.
It's so counterintuitive to how I grew up. and how failure was just like a scary thing in school and in college, and your college professors would be like, if you fail, like you'll never make it. And it's like, no, failure is a very natural and normal part of growth. Like now I've shifted my mindset, at least, to when I fail, I'm like, sweet, one step closer to success, because it's going to take however many failures, and check, that's one of them. And so I think just shifting that mindset from failure is the end to failure is the beginning or the next step is really critical.
I'm answering Anita's had a question. I don't know if she's still here, but she asks, in my experience, how often have difficult leaders sharks in the water is what my interpretation is there. Read the forum's comments and taken action to improve the psych safety amongst teams. And my answer is it's a complex situation, but I've never seen a leader not express interest, especially in today's environment, not express interest in getting better. I have seen a very senior leader, when given that list of anonymous feedback, do a great job. And it's so important to acknowledge that it is their prerogative to, again, back to that motto of all feedback is desired, all feedback is not actionable. So he said, it was interesting the way he responded to it. So some of them, like every other one, he's like, not going to do anything about that, not going to do it. It's just his style. So it'd been great if he'd say like, that would be complex to do. He was just more like, nope. So it was funny to see him, and it was front of his leadership team. So I just thought he'd be more like nuanced and more diplomatic kind of response. But that's the strongest that I've seen in terms of like, I'm not going to do anything about the feedback.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if anybody has anybody done anything like this before and given fierce feedback to leaders. It's a treacherous space. So if anybody's got a story, again, if anybody's got to go take off, we can hang around for a few minutes here.
Yeah, I actually just got done leading the organization I'm with right now through like a leadership focus group. So it's a similar kind of session. We took like a smaller audience of folks based on some engagement surveys that we did, took that smaller group, ran everything through Miro, kind of gathering feedback, and then dot voting on what we felt was like the most important piece.
Yeah.
Gathered all that and then brought it exactly how you suggested too, which was take that feedback and don't just broadcast it openly. Like go to the leadership group initially, have those conversations, because like you said, they're hearing some things and their feelings get hurt. They're like, oh shit, like there's a little bit of like, wow, this really is me kind of thing. And then we just got out of a session earlier this week where we kind of brought everybody back together and talked about those things, but then gave the leaders a platform to say like, hey, based on the feedback that you heard, what are some actions that you're going to take? So we kind of put the ball in the leaders' hands to say, what are some things that you learned stood out to you? And it was really cool to see like the humility and the transparency and openness that kind of came from that. So it's obviously still a work in progress, and then see if the actions marry the words. But it was really interesting.
Very cool. I'm so glad to hear that you're already doing something in that space. The worst example I've had of a leader, this is way before I was an agile coach. I reported to a guy along with some other people, and we just all thought he was a terrible leader. And I worked up the courage one day to say, his name was Jim. Jim, would you like some feedback? And he laughed and he said, what could a person like you have to tell me that I could learn from? I'm like, wow, how arrogant. But I was like, so does that mean you don't?
Is that enough?
His eyes like, I guess. It's like, okay, here to. I don't remember why I was so traumatized by his response, like I was an ant to be squashed. It was so bad. It was before, I mean, this was back in 1995, actually. So sure was, I'm not a young chick here. Anyway.
Yeah, Michaelin says that she recently tried to give some fierce feedback and it did not go well, which is why she's here.
I'm the introvert in the meeting chat this whole time, but yeah, exactly. it just didn't go very well. And so I've dug into the
Mm.
psych safety literature on that. And I love what
Mhm.
you're doing. I think this is so amazing. And it seems like the scope that you have is kind of working with leaders. I'm kind of curious to create resources for people like me who is like trying to figure out what influence you can have on managing upward, and like what are some frameworks we can use to help those people, and even navigating like decision, like kind of like a decision tool of, do I stay or leave if these things that I've
Mhm.
tried aren't working? And then, what are frameworks or
Yeah.
suggestions you can give those people for, here's how you should interview other companies to like look for that, and trying to like normalize
Mm.
that as well. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. That's simply just because of the position I'm in right now. I
Mhm.
definitely love like what you're doing, and think the first try is obviously to influence the leadership. But if that doesn't work, it's kind of like, what can you do?
I think those are some really great questions. And I like,
Mhm.
in particular, your question about how to interview other companies to look for their level of psychological safety. So
Mhm.
we have a community of agile coaches and we do staffing augmentation. And when I interview people to bring them into our community, I have soft skill questions inside of there. I ask, like, when you have a disagreement, or when you have a conflict, or when you have to give bad news, what kind of mindset are you bringing into that? How do you approach the situation? And that response that I get from the individual lets me know if they're psychologically safe. It lets me know if they're aware of soft skills. It lets me know if they think about people besides themselves. Like, it gives me the opportunity to see that from someone I'm interviewing, but I haven't really thought about it from the opposite side. Obviously, if your interviewer is asking soft skill questions, you can be like, hey, they know this exists and probably care about it. But absent that marker, I'm not really sure. That's a great question.
Yeah. By the way, this is, I'm going to try to put it in the chat here. Um, something to consider. There's check in Zoom chat now. Cool. So I shared it on the screen briefly, but we've had this come up before. What do you do if you have managing up? How do you deal with the shark? If your leader's a shark, what do you do? So I actually popped this question into Chat GPT and then tweaked some things. I said, so compare real sharks to sharks in the water as we define them, and it gave little like things to do. Like in a real shark, you punch it in the nose, actually, you're aggressive the shark to save your life. And so ultimately, if you can't get away from the shark, you run away. So yeah, it's actually what you said made me think of the little slide that we made as a result of someone asking a similar question before. And Sarah, you're going to send out everybody that attended today. I forget how it works with Meetup, but definitely everybody that attends, we have the ability to send out an email or broadcast somehow. So all the materials that you just saw will be shared. And again, Sarah, let's make sure to share my free busy scheduling link. We don't expect anything. We just want to help. We've been doing this for years. We've seen so many agile transformations fail before I even got into psych safety personally. And I've had that offer for many years, and a lot of people take me up on it. So love to help you out. Let me know what we can do. We're way over time. You guys, it's been fun. Now it's like a real meetup. Do you remember going in person before COVID and people like hang out and eat? And anyways, so this has been fun hanging out with you a little long. I love this. So thanks so much for your time today. I'm gonna turn it over to you, to Sarah, to close it out.
Yeah, well, thank you all very much for joining us. This has been a really great session. Michaelin, especially, if you want to take advantage of that free hour of consultation, I'm sure Brian and you can dig into your questions a lot more, and we can get you some actionable items to use. For everybody else, you're also welcome to use that same thing. I'm going to send the link out to you guys. I'll send out the recording. So I know Sharon and a few other people had to drop in and out, so you'll be able to access all of the information. And I should also be able to send out the slides themselves so that you can see all of the material. So thank you very much for your time today. It's been a pleasure getting to know all of you, and we hope to see you at the next one.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Bye,
Thank
guys.
you.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.